Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. We are going to continue working on Jim's Mk4. This is the Mk4 that we got in the shop that you saw in the last video. We're going to be working on some brakes. We're going to be working on cutting an access panel in the top of the foot box so that we can gain access to change the clutch cable. We're going to be hopefully tying up some loose ends on some wiring that's underneath the car, in the tunnel, in the rear portion of the car, and maybe even in the engine bay. I don't know how long this video is going to run. Stay tuned. Okay, so I'm getting right into it. We know that the axle was not centered underneath the car. So you can center these on the chassis and get really, really close. But the bodies on these cars aren't symmetrical. So sometimes, even after you go through all the trouble of centering it on the chassis, you're probably going to want to center it to adjust it to allow the fenders to have equal overlap on each side. So we've already done that. We've turned the panhard bar so that we could get equal fender coverage on each side. And so on this side, when I measure it, we've got about an inch, just a little over an inch, maybe an inch and an eighth, from the edge of the tire to the outer lip of the fender. And then now we have the same on this side. So before, this side was well inside the fender and the other side of the car was at the edge of the fender lip. So we probably moved it a good, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. So that translates to almost an inch and a half when you're dealing with the offset of the tires to the body. One thing we did find as we were doing that, and I did tighten down the panhard bar, but we are going to nut and bolt this entire car. So even though I've tightened the panhard bar down now, I'm probably going to check it again when I do the rest of the suspension back here. But we found that the pinion angle is just way, way off in this thing. I mean, you can look how high the transmission is and how low the differential is. Now, we could adjust the third link up there. You can see there are no threads showing on the upper link, or just one or two threads showing. So we could crank that out and we could bring the pinion angle up. But the problem is it's so severe that I started looking around and I noticed that there is an inch and a half spacer under the transmission. So you can see the red energy suspension transmission mount right there, and then there's an inch and a half by about 4.5 inch aluminum spacer underneath. We could probably get by with half of that spacer. Now, a lot of guys put spacers underneath the transmission because what will happen is the tail shaft of the transmission right here will be literally sitting on top of this cross member. And so with that, depending on the length of your drive shaft, sometimes the yoke will make contact here. The other thing I found is the transmission yoke doesn't have what I would consider an adequate amount of engagement in the back of the transmission. So we may end up lengthening this drive shaft, which isn't a huge deal. I can take this down to the drive shaft shop that we use. They'll cut off the end. They'll weld on a longer tube. They'll balance it, and usually it's less than, $200 to have that done. I think the last one I took to them was like $110. But that, that was probably a couple years ago. So with prices changing every day, we'll see how much they charge us for this one. But I think that's definitely going to need to be done, because even by the time we bring that transmission down in the back and bring the yoke of, or not the yoke, the pinion up on the end of the differential, I think we're still going to have an issue with the drive shaft being too short. We don't want the yoke all the way in because this is a solid axle, so it's an active transmission, or active rear end. It moves up and down, so you need some movement in it, so you don't throw the yoke into the back seal of the transmission. But at the same time, you need to have enough spline engagement so that everything works properly. So we're looking at that. We're going to be, I think I said in the next video, we're going to be changing the clutch cable out to a Ford unit that is much better for the actual feel of the clutch. And so I think I may bring you guys back when I am either cutting the access panel into the top of the driver's foot box, or we'll see. All right, everybody, changing plans. I did not move on to cutting the access in the top of the driver's foot box. I moved on to brakes. We've got brake pads on order already. We're going to go with a more aggressive street pad. We're going to go with the Hawk. I think they're the HP Plus. So I think they sell one more aggressive pad for street use, and then you're into a track or autocross pad. But we've used these in the past, and they work really good for initial bite. So with manual brakes, that's what you're looking for, that initial bite of the brake pad. But I pulled off the rotors, and to do that, of course, I had to pull off the calipers and the caliper brackets and the pads. The pads don't look bad, but boy, the front ones sure look thin for a car that doesn't have any miles on it. I don't know if maybe there was some reused parts. I don't know how else to explain it, but in the back, the brake pads are kind of the same. I've got like two different thickness of brake pads. The pad on the left is thinner than the brake pad on the right. Normally, with the vented rotors, and I have one just kind of sitting on there right now, with the vented rotors, you're going to use the thinner pad. They're made for the 11.5-inch vented rotors, and those are seen in the early Cobra models and on all of the later GTs. So I don't know why I've got two different thickness of pads, and this rotor here isn't in bad shape. There's not a whole lot of thickness differential right right here. We're going to take these in. We're going to have them cleaned up. This is the rear rotor from this side. There's a pretty good right here. There's a pretty good difference in height right here. So again, I don't know what the situation was, but you can see how rusty the rotors were. That could just be because the car sat for a long period of time. I can't be sure, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my micrometer and I'm going to check these for thickness before I take them down to the machinist, just to verify that they are thick enough that we can have them machined. But I believe they should have been new rotors when the car was put together. So these are the fronts. Those of you that don't know, the front PBRs are from a 99 through 2002 Ford Mustang, either model. The base model and the GT both had the same brakes. You had, when you stepped up to the Cobra, the Mach 1, or some of the other special, like the Bullet, those had the 14-inch front rotors. So the front rotors on this are actually smaller than the rears. These are 11.5s. These are 11s. So still a 2-piston front and a single piston rear, but a little bit different than the earlier like Cobra and even the GTs, because the GTs had a 11-inch front rotors and they had a 10.5-inch rear, but it was not a non-vented rotor. So I'm getting a little into the weeds here. You guys don't need all this information, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the brake rotors to the machinist tomorrow, and then he's usually pretty good, and I should have him back by the end of the day if I have the time to go pick them up. And then hopefully Jim, the owner, ordered the the brakes today. Today is Sunday, so the order probably won't go in until tomorrow. And then I also found that we have some issues in the front. The lower ball joint boots are just destroyed. They're dried out, they're cracked. It doesn't appear as though this car was ever lubed. So however it was put together in the beginning, if all that stuff was dry, I just hope it doesn't. The car doesn't have a whole lot of go-kart miles on it, because those front end components have been basically dry since the car was put together, and then the car sat. We do have the pole position front upper control arms, which those of you that have been in the Factory 5 community for some time know that those are kind of suspect. You really have to watch those things because they have a smaller diameter shaft on both the front and the rear of them, and there have been some issues in the past where those threaded pieces have cracked or broken. I'm going to tear these apart because we ordered new sleeves for the front adjuster sleeves. Simply because we're at the end of the threads. I mean, the threads are about this long, and we've got about that much thread engagement into the sleeves, and so I'm not comfortable with that. So even though this is a manual steer car, I'll probably dial another degree of camber into it, and then caster, and then with that, the adjuster sleeves in the back will actually move, they'll be threaded in more because we're going to add that caster. And then we'll replace the lower ball joints. And then I think the front end will be good. I found some electrical issues in the front. I would have used weather pack connectors to attach both the headlights and the front turn signals. It wasn't done. So the wiring inside the fender is a little messy, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace the tie wraps that go, across the 3/4 inch tubes on the front to hold the wiring in, and replace all the tie wraps with the P-clips or the Cushing clips, and rivet those in and clean that up. And I'll just leave the connectors in the front out of the equation for right now. I'll be talking to the owner. If he wants to change them, that's probably something we can do on this part 2. I just want to be able to get as much of the stuff done that's on his list this time and address any of the safety issues. So the brakes are a pretty important part. I didn't think that we could just let that slide. And I'm sure now that we took the brake components off, it wasn't just a matter of re-bleeding it, even though I am going to re-bleed the system and put fresh fluid in once we get everything else taken care of. So with that, I will catch up with you guys tomorrow night. It's getting late. It's just about supper time. I'll see you tomorrow. All right, next night, I am out in the shop, and I only have a few minutes before I go in for supper, so I figured I would catch everyone up on the work that's going on Jim's car. So, we pulled off all the rotors, and yesterday, I didn't film any yesterday because I've been drywalling the last couple of days. I don't know if you can see it on my shirt. I got drywall mud all over my shirt, and it's actually worse on my t-shirt underneath the sweatshirt. But I was just beat at the end of the day, so I got the rotors over to the machinist, and today I picked those up. So we actually have 4 rotors here. These 2 are the fronts. These are the 11 inch for the front, and there are the 11.5 inch for the rears. Now, a lot of these rotors are coming from China right now, and where all of the older, oh god, these things are heavy, US made rotors would have a indicator, whatever, a marking on the inside of the rotor somewhere to tell you what the minimum machine thickness could be. Neither of these had any. So neither of the fronts and neither of the rears. I went online and I went to rockauto.com, and on some of the rotors available for these models, so for instance, these are for either a 94, 95 Mustang GT with the single piston fronts, or the 99 through 2002 two-piston PBRs. Same rotor. So I looked to see what the minimum thickness on those were. It was 0.9774. I wrote it down on each one of the rotors. This way the machinist didn't have to look it up. Now, if you're taking it to a parts store to have them machine your rotors, they have access to these numbers. You just tell them what make and model the rotors come from, and they'll look it up, and they'll decide whether or not they're going to be able to be machined or not. With the machinist, he was able to take off just the smallest amount across the face of the rotors. And so we're almost near the same thickness we were before. It was just enough to clean up the glaze that was on the rotors. And then you can see here on the back ones, I wrote down the number as well. That one was a 0.660 for the minimum thickness. So I took these over to the machinist yesterday, and he actually told me that they'd be done in an hour. And I just told him straight up, I'm not coming back today. I'm too bloody tired. So I picked those up today after I was done with work, and they're ready to go back on the car. I'm waiting for brake pads. I'm not going to put those on until the brake pads show up, because then I can just do it all at once. I'm also waiting on dust boots for the front ball joints. The lower ball joints, the dust boots have just started to disintegrate. But the car has, I actually verified the mileage, it has 13 miles on it. So I know the ball joints are good because the car hasn't been driven. So we are going to put new dust boots on the lower control arm ball joints. And while we have it apart, we're just going to do the uppers. I'm going to change the boots on the uppers as well, and that way we can grease everything and it'll all be good to go. I think we found a solution for the lower rad hose. Mark Reynolds over at Breeze has on his site listed one of his cool tubes or cooling tubes or whatever they're called. I know Boyd has, the name cool tubes. But they used to make all of Mark's stuff anyway. So he has listed on his site a cooling tube for a big block, but he only lists it as being good for a Mark 1 through Mark 2. But there's kind of a note on there that says must be used with the Factory 5/AFCO radiator, which is what we have. So we ordered it, but we're going to follow up with a call tomorrow just to make sure that it's going to work. I'm sure I can make it work. So I'm not too worried about it. And I think Mark is clearancing these out. There's just not a whole lot of call for guys putting big blocks in these things. So with that, I think we have a solution for the lower cooling hose. And we've got that ordered, and we're going to install that once it gets here, which involves draining the coolant, which is really going to suck. But we'll get past that. Let me turn the camera around, and I'm going to show you what else we did last night that I didn't film. Little engine pouring for you. Okay, what we didn't film yesterday is I cut an access in the top of the foot box. Now, if you follow us on social media, you'll see on the Facebook page that I butchered this to get it cut. But I needed to make an initial cut in it to verify that I wasn't going to drill or run a abrasive wheel or a Sawzall blade or a body saw blade or anything like that into anything behind the panel. And it's a good thing I did, because if you look right here, there is a brake line right there. And if I would have just set my drill through without any what's the word I'm looking for? Any idea of what was behind there, I mean, I could have hit that brake line. But as it was, I have a very shallow hole saw that I use for this. That's just made for drilling into electrical boxes. I think it's made by, I want to say it's made by Greenlee, and it's a very shallow hole saw. It has very few teeth on it, and it cuts through aluminum like that. So that's what I used on the 1, 2, 3 corners of this. And then what I did is I actually took a pair of aviation snips, tin snips, just straight cutting tin snips. You know which the straight cutting ones are by the color of the handles, yellow handles, straight cutting. So I went from corner to corner and then corner to corner inside of where my final lines were going to be just to get that piece out. And with that, then I was able to make sure that I wasn't going to hit anything. And then I took the angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and I cut the bottom edge. I took the angle grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut this edge. And then what I did is I scored it as much as I could in that curve. And then I slowly moved it up and down to get the aluminum to break. The nice thing about the 6061 aluminum is if you bend it a couple of times back and forth, because it's a harder compound than, let's say, the 5052, it will snap off. You can also score it with a knife. The problem is I couldn't score it with a knife on the underside or the back side of it, so that wasn't going to help me. But we got that all cut out. I'm going to take some cardboard, probably tomorrow. I'm going to make a template, and then I'm going to cut myself out a piece of aluminum and put it in the brake to get that angle that's right in here. And then I don't know if we're going to send this in with riv nuts or threaded inserts and a couple of machine screws, or whether we're just going to pop rivet it back on once we're done. The only problem I have with the pop rivets is that since it's a manual clutch and we do have a clutch cable in there, if this were to break while you're out on the road, let's say, because I'm going to take this clutch cable off for Jim and I'm going to throw it in the trunk, and so he'll have a spare. It just won't be, a brand new Ford unit, but he'll have a spare. And so if for some reason he breaks a clutch cable while I was out on the road, if I just install this with a couple of threaded inserts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe, and some Phillips head machine screws, he can pull that thing off roadside and swap the clutch cable out. I mean, it's not easy to get underneath the car, but it can be done. You can drive one side of the car up on a curb, on like an approach apron into a driveway, and crawl under the car, and you can change out the bottom and you can change out the top if you have access. So not the easiest thing in the world, but by far not the hardest. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that, like I said, tomorrow, and I will catch up with you guys all then. All right, that was a really cool Steely Dan song that you guys would have enjoyed, but had to turn the music off. Anyways, changing plans. I had to move some stuff around in the shop, and I did get notification today that Michael's car is supposed to be done at upholstery on Friday, which means I'll probably be picking it up sometime next week. So I'm going to try to get as much stuff done this weekend as I can, and then I'm going to have to probably move Slytherin down to the other shop, because I'm going to need some more room here in the shop here. I had a change in plans since I had to bring the car body in for the 25th anniversary car. So that is right here. The 25th anniversary car is underneath the lift right here. And that is because we are experiencing some high winds this week. And although they haven't materialized for the last 2 nights, even though the Weather Service has told us they would, I don't want to take the chance. I don't want to have to move that car body in, 2 o'clock in the morning, because all of a sudden the winds pick up. So it's going to stay in the shop here for probably the next couple days. But I did get brake pads so I can put the back brakes together, and I did get the adjusters for the front upper control arms, but I don't have the ball joint boots yet. So I don't want to mess with the front suspension until I have those boots, because honestly it's going to be a lot easier to just do all that stuff at once. And then I can throw the fast track tool on the front and try to get an alignment done. So I'm going to work on the brakes. I'm going to show you guys what we got. We did end up with the HP Plus from Hawk, and so these are the pads, and we will be installing those on the freshly turned rotors, and I will bring you guys back once I get at least one side done, because watching the same thing over and over again kind of sucks. So we'll do one side, show you what it looks like, and bring you back. Well, missing persons that time. However, I want this channel to remain as upfront and honest as it can possibly be. And we're not doing brakes tonight. After all that, we're not doing brakes tonight because when I went to go ahead and put the rotor on, and I will grab a rotor from over here and see if I can do this with one hand. So here's the rotor, and I'm going to put it up here, right? And I'm going to show you that it moves around. Okay, so you're asking yourself, well, just, you know, or you're telling yourself, just put the lug nuts on, it'll be fine. The problem with that is there's going to be so much run out on the outside, meaning that the disc is actually going to be going around in an oval. I'm exaggerating the amount, but I'm going to explain to you the problem here. Okay, so these are Fox axles. So if you have any exposure to Fox Mustangs, they originally came with 4-lug axles, right? And so a lot of companies, even like Summit Racing and Jeg, sell their own brand. I don't know who makes their axles, but they'll sell you a replacement. And the problem with that is the interior portion of the hub right here is sized just like the axles that were on a Fox Mustang or Fox Body Mustang. The problem with that is these rotors are SN95 and later. So the diameter of the inside of this hole that's supposed to receive this portion of the hub is larger. Now you can order the right axles. You can order Fox width axles and 5-lug that have a SN95 inside hub here. Or what you can do is you can buy I think they call it a concentric ring that fits around this hub, and then the rotor will fit over the outside of that. The only place I know to get those is a place, I think it's called Disc Brakes R Us. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to order those and see if we can get those in the next couple of days. I had hoped to finish up the fabrication of the top right here, the top that I'm working on for the foot box, but with the car in the air, I'm not going to be able to install it. I'm still probably going to make this piece tonight. This was my template material of the day. I'm still going to probably make this panel tonight, but since I can't lower the car because I've got another car under it, I'm not going to be able to install it. So another change in plans. I don't know how long this video is running right now, so I'm going to check the video for length and determine whether or not we're going to close it out here or whether I'm going to bring you back hopefully tomorrow when I install this, because I'm going to be waiting on brake parts, it looks like. All right, everybody, here's the thing. I'm at a standstill, and it's not the car owner's fault. In this case, it's not my fault either. There's really no one to blame for this right now. But I looked at how long the video was going last night as I was editing some of it, and it's getting kind of long. So I'm going to have to end it here. Here's where we're at. I am waiting for these concentric rings that are going to go on the hub in order to center the rear rotors. Now, I could, if I didn't have the car body and the chassis in here for the 25th anniversary car, I could raise and lower the Mark IV, Jim's Mark IV, and I could get to the access panel. I could pull the clutch out, or the clutch cable out. I could replace that, and some other things. The engine in this, we're actually going to have to remove some spacers that were put in there. The engine's sitting too high. It's actually contacting the bottom of the hood where the stacks are. And so I talked to another big block builder. Thank you, Al. I appreciate the help. And there's no reason that either of us see for the spacers under the engine. Now, maybe we'll find that there was a reason after we get it lowered down, and if so, then we'll have to put it back where it was. But it's really messing with our drive line too, and so I need to get the drive line lower. And in order to do that, I need those spacers out so I can actually tilt the back of the motor down on the transmission end to get that transmission more in line with the yoke on the rear differential. So I'm kind of at a standstill on this. I'm waiting for those bushings. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put the rear tire back on the car so that I can move it back and forth. Probably tomorrow I'm going to move some cars around in the shop, and since this doesn't have brakes, I really can't start it up and move it because that bad things might happen. So I'm just going to push it off the lift, and then I will put the 25th anniversary car back on the lift. So the winds are supposed to subside sometime after 10 o'clock tonight, so I'm hoping we can put the 25th anniversary Pauline, put that body outside, and then get a little bit more room here in the shop. And I plan on working on the 25th anniversary car over the next couple of days. I really want to get the brake lines in the back of the car all squared away. Although they were installed, we're going to go ahead. We've already cracked all of the fittings loose. We're going to go ahead and lube the threads on those, and lube the end of the fittings, and put everything back in place, and then work our way forward, because we took off both brake lines that attached to the master cylinders because we were installing all the footbox aluminum. So I'm going to work on the 25th anniversary car while I wait for parts for Jim's Mk4. So I want to thank you guys all for watching. If you're enjoying the content, please do the like, the share, the subscribe. We really appreciate all the views that we've been getting lately. Some of the views that we got on the 25th anniversary car were just unbelievable. So thank you for that. I'll talk to you guys all later in the next video. Have a great day.